his Lollards thought it intolerable that Christians should be denied direct access to their holy book. They were determined to put the Bible into English. And that decision was to have the most momentous of consequences. And for a few brave Englishmen, it would mean arrest, interrogation, and death. In late 14th century England, a revolutionary movement began. Englishmen, followers of John Wycliffe, or Lollards, began to translate the Bible into their own language.
In the beginning, God made heaven and earth.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
The thought of the earth was evil
and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep.
The Spirit of the Lord was born.
The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
And God said, "Licht be mad," and licht was mad.
And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
In translating the Bible, the Lollards were rescuing and perhaps defining their own language. 300 years before, in Anglo-Saxon England, people had made translations of parts of the Bible. Early English had developed the finest vernacular literature in Europe. But after the Battle of Hastings and the Norman Conquest, French and Latin took over. The native English was not quite dead, however, and in this new Bible, it would rise again. And this is it, a Bible translated by Wycliffe and his associates, and this copy finished in 1408 after 6 months of the most painstaking transcription into this beautifully preserved and elegant hand. And translated not from Greek or from Hebrew, but from the only thing they really had available to them, which was Latin.
There are in fact two different versions of the Wycliffite Bible. The first of them is very literal indeed, and that is following both the Latin word order and the Latin words. The later version of the Wycliffite Bible is deliberately much more idiomatic, much closer to what people actually spoke.
That idiomatic English translation fitted the spirit of the times.
There is a political resonance. Nationalism was associated with the English language, perhaps more strongly than it was with the land of England itself. So yes, the existence of the Bible in English certainly had some effect towards the defining of an English nationalism.
That was why some of the most powerful people in the country had encouraged new writing in English, and why Wycliffe had supporters. And here, at his church in Lutterworth near Leicester, there is evidence of the extent of that support. The church was painted in Wycliffe's time. It shows 2 kings and a queen, and there's a local tradition that it refers to Wycliffe's guardian angels, King Richard II, his queen, and his uncle, John of Gaunt. Richard II and John of Gaunt protected Wycliffe and his ideas from the furious denunciations of the established church, and so he was able to remain here in Lutterworth and continue his work on a translation of the Bible. And it was here, a few years later, and peacefully enough, that he died. Not long after he died, the translation of the whole Bible into English was completed. But the church was still enraged. A series of repressive measures tried to put a stop to the Lollard movement Wycliffe had inspired. In 1407, Wycliffe's books were banned, and the English translation of the Bible with them. From now on, just possessing a copy of the English Bible was evidence of heresy. And heresy was punishable not simply by death, but by burning. In 1415, 30 years after his death, a full council of the whole church condemned Wycliffe as a heretic, and a bizarre ritual resulted. In 1428, nearly half a century after he was buried, Wycliffe's body was dug up again by the authorities. This macabre ritual was the church's revenge.
Haec Sanctus Synodos declarat deficientiae eundem Johannem Wycliffe.
This Holy Council declares, defines and determines the same John Wycliffe to have been a notorious and persistent heretic, indeed to have died as a heretic.
Then his body was handed over to the authorities and burned.
Likewise, this council anathematizes him utterly and condemns his memory, and decrees and orders that his body and bones, if they can be distinguished from the bodies of the faithful, be exhumed and cast far from the cemetery of the church, according to the legitimate sanction of canon law.
By burning the corpse of Wycliffe, the authorities wished to destroy utterly his ideas, but it was a forlorn hope. The Lollard English Bible continued to be immensely popular among the common people of England. Even after the last high-profile Lollards had been executed, it continued to be searched out, passed around, and read. More manuscripts of that Bible survive than of any other medieval English text, including Chaucer, despite the fact that it was illegal.
Anybody reading or hearing the Wycliffite Bible in the 15th century knows that they're doing it illegally. Some groups of lay people sort of clubbed together and got a manuscript written or bought a manuscript, which probably would have been...
Book club.
Exactly, yes. They did have Bible book clubs in the 15th century.
This was some way short of a reformation. The Lollards had scant interest in demolishing the established church. They were more concerned with living good, pious Christian lives. But one book survives from that time, the Lollard Bible. It was illegal, and the fact that it was beyond the law was an affront which rankled with English people for the next century and a half. And then, in the time of King Henry VIII, the frustration boiled over. A new attack was made on the church establishment, and with it came a new and potent translation. An English gospel translated from the original Greek texts, and in words which would transform the English language itself.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by it, and without it was made nothing that was made.
Most of what we know of the Bible today was translated by one man. He was a scholar who came from Gloucestershire. He was born in 1494, less than a century after Wycliffe died at Lutterworth. His writings were to change English culture and the English language forever, and his name was William Tyndale.
And the light shineth in the darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not.
Tyndale seems to have had a sort of ear for the memorable, for the rhythms and patterns of the spoken word. What we call the authorized version of the 17th century is really Tyndale revised. And some of the most memorable phrases are Tyndale's. So, not just a translator, certainly not a hack translator on any definition.
What really drove Tyndale was a passionate desire to put the Bible directly into the hands of believers.
Who is so blind to say, they cannot be showed the light who walk in darkness, for they cannot but stumble, and where to stumble is the danger of eternal damnation.
It was no coincidence that the great translator came from Gloucestershire. Gloucestershire was a rich weaving district, and like many other cloth regions, it was a focus of Lollard descent.
Lollardy was very alive, and it would have been phenomenal if he hadn't been aware of it as a boy. It had gone underground after the two peasant revolts. It was not safe, but the effect had been great. There were Wycliffe Bibles, Lollard Bibles in English from the Latin, around.
And this wasn't just an upper-class fad.
What was remarkable about Lollardy, which contributed greatly to Tyndale's understanding of the need, was that everybody was in the picture. The Bible was read to everybody.
That was what scared churchmen. Even though it had been decades since Lollard ideas had been a real threat, the ban remained. Occasionally, the local bishops conducted a purge, and when they did so, they discovered that Wycliffe's ideas were far from forgotten. In one case in 1506, 60 people were arrested in one village alone, and 2 burned as heretics. In Gloucestershire, Tyndale's family were established local landowners. But it's possible that they were also, in their hearts at least, rebellious Lollards. We don't know for sure. Certainly, they didn't give voice to their opinions. Tyndale, as we know, is going to be very different. But it was only after he left this area for Oxford that he began to speak the words which already he was thinking. Since Wycliffe's time, the intellectual world had been transformed. First, the invention of printing had vastly increased the number of books in circulation, far more titles and huge editions. But even more important for Tyndale was the explosion of scholarship in the Renaissance. The ancient languages, Hebrew and Greek, in which the Bible was originally written, were now widely studied, and new manuscripts were discovered, and they were much better understood. But the church's grip on intellectual life remained. When Tyndale arrived here at Oxford, it was to a place which still seethed with paranoia about all things Lollard. This was, after all, the university which, to its shame, had offered succour to Wycliffe, and so there was a deep suspicion of anyone arriving here with unorthodox religious views.